Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Appraisal Buzzcast. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed below to get notified of the latest Buzzcast. Today, we'll be speaking with Joan Trice, CEO of Allterra Group, and Matt Simmons of Maxwell, Hendry Simmons. We'll be talking about ways to power up your business and how appraisers can grow their business through hiring trainees, and finally, what the business building workshop is. Joan, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Jim, and good morning, Matt, and welcome to Appraisal Buzzcast, your first and hopefully not your last. And what I wanted to talk about today is the business building workshop that we plan on having at Valuation Expo in September 8th through the 10th. For those of you who haven't signed up, please do. And this workshop is sponsored by Solidify. And I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I don't know why we waited so long, but I think it's long overdue. And that is, I think appraisers spend a lot of time honing their skills on how to be a better appraiser, but they really don't get any guidance on how to be an effective appraisal business owner. Right. And then that dovetails, of course, into whether it makes sense to hire trainees or not. So within this session, we're going to cover marketing, we're going to cover technology, we're going to cover legal and accounting. And then you've got the last segment that's sort of how do you take all of these different elements and power up your business. So share with our audience what that really means.
Sure. Thanks, Joan. So in a nutshell, it's probably easiest for me to explain how we view our company and why we are set up the way that we are. We view our core competency as a firm as market analysis. So when it comes to even how we identify, certainly, we do a ton of appraisal work, both commercially and residentially. But we don't even identify necessarily as appraisers. We really view our core competency and our identity as market analysts. And of course, who better to provide appraisal services than excellent market analysts? But the analyst side, the market analysis component, is really what we view our core competency to be. Appraisal is just kind of an outflow service of that core competency. So what we're going to talk about at the business workshop at the Expo is really how to not just diversify your client base. That gets talked about, I think, a lot, and that's been covered, I know, at other events. And certainly a part of that is taking your appraisal practice and moving outside of just lender and AMC work. Yep, we all kind of understand that and have heard that. But I want to kind of move even further from that and talk about elements of valuation services that most appraisers don't touch in any way, shape, or form, but where there are huge opportunities to grow your practice and to be able to build a larger business surrounding many of these other services.
Like what's a for example of these other services you're referring to?
Yeah, so in the way that I'll describe it, and in fact, I'm even kind of making a motion with my hands similar to the advisory opinion 21 within USPAP, that has that image that most of us are familiar with valuation services as the larger sphere, appraisal practice as the smaller sphere, and being a component of valuation services. So this stuff in valuation services, the consulting stuff on our end, that includes tax appeal representation for people for their property taxes. You can do that under appraisal services. The way that we approach it is actually in a consulting capacity. And attendees at the event, I'll get into kind of granular detail of what that looks like, how to prospect that business, ways to line it up to where it's efficient, but it's a great opportunity. And everyday fee appraisers are the best people to be doing that type of work. Oftentimes there's unlicensed tax representatives who are doing it, who aren't nearly as skilled as we are in that capacity. And all it takes is just focusing your direction toward it to build a significant line of business doing tax appeal work. Another thing that we do a lot of are what we call value impact studies. So I'm going to talk a lot about this at the workshop, but almost every land development code in the country has a component where if you're going to build a project as a developer and you need to change the zoning or the land use, part of the approval criteria is that you can't negatively impact surrounding property owners. I mean, that language is in almost every land development code in the country. But what hasn't happened is that there's been no one really who stepped into that role during the entitlements process. Maybe the planner who the developer has hired may kind of speak to it, but that's really not their area of expertise. Maybe a city or county staff has an analysis and reaches some sort of conclusion. But again, that's also not, competent, substantial evidence. And so we found about 7 or 8 years ago, when we first got pulled into this, that there was a massive need in the zoning and land use process, or whatever in your jurisdiction it might be called, to have someone who's competent provide a study and analyze, hey, if we build this 200-unit multifamily project, is there going to be a negative impact to this surrounding residential community? The skills to evaluate that are squarely within the reach of an appraiser. That is like our domain. And so we do a lot of these studies now. We do those even, in fact, not just within our home market of Southwest Florida. We're getting demand across the state of Florida at this point, because again, there's been so much of a need and no one's been tapping into it. So those are examples, but there's a lot more.
All right, well, let's do this. Let's break for a commercial message. And when we come back, let's talk about trainees. All right,
Thanks,
Jim.
Joan. Stop waiting 30 days to get paid on your appraisal invoices. Cicady Capital is a simple and secure payment platform that improves your cash flow and reduces the time you have to spend on paperwork and making collection calls. The process is simple. After the initial account setup, simply submit your invoices to Cicady Capital instead of your AMC or lender. You receive payment the next business day while Cicady Capital collects the payment from your AMC or lender, leaving you with more time to do what you want to do. For additional questions or to set up your account, call Cicady Capital Support Team at 208-953-7234, 208-953-7234, or email support@cicady.com, SEKADY.com. Back to you, Joan.
Thank you, Jim. So Matt, obviously there's been a lot of chatter lately about there aren't enough appraisers to serve the current volume of business and even a normalized volume of business, because I think during the pandemic, my understanding was about 50% of all the loans actually got an appraisal waiver, which is an astoundingly high number. It's quite obvious that the appraisal community couldn't handle double the volume for certain. But the biggest pushback from the current rank and file appraisal community is they don't want to hire trainees, or most of them don't. And you know what all the objections are. So cover some of those and a response to those objections.
Sure. So yeah, and obviously it's, I don't want to train my competition, I can't make money off of them, on and on the list goes. We happily bring in trainees as part of our way to grow our business. In fact, some of the longest term growth we've had is directly connected to people that we've brought from start to finish, straight out of college, even people interning while they're still in college with us. I think the way that you have to think about appraiser or about trainees is tied to how you view your business. If you're really building something that the entity itself has value, you have to kind of look at the long term. I mean, not necessarily 10, 15, 20 years, but you've at least got to have a horizon of 3 to 5 years in your mind. When we bring in a trainee, the way that you look at the trainee initially is not as a profit center. And I think that's really critical, because if you're looking to bring someone in and immediately start making money off of them in the first month or two or something, that's just way too short-sighted. I think the goal of bringing in a trainee is to have them adding enough value to the process that they cover their carry, so to speak, for that first initial, 2, 3, 4, 6 months, maybe, depending on what you're training them to do. And from there, the dividends start paying off. But some of the issues that happen with people not having success with trainees honestly stems from just not training them properly. If you think that you can bring somebody in the door and pop a file in front of them and show them, here's your a la mode software, have at it, and that everything is going to happen by osmosis, you're going to find out, you're sorely mistaken. So you've got to invest time into them and not view it as, I'm looking to make money by next month on this person. You've just got to have a little bit more of a longer perspective than that. And then the other piece as it relates to trainees, and this kind of speaks to, am I training my competition? If you set up your business in a way that attracts people and rewards them for the work and the value that they provide, you don't have those issues. And so I think you have to view people as part of your team and as part of a long-term investment. And one thing that I spend a lot of time on is just thinking, how best can I support the people that we have, trainees, certified and otherwise. But if you just take that perspective and think, I'm their coach, I'm bringing people through, my goal is to lift them up and build their professional career. And if I do that the right way, it pays dividends, and they're not going to take off from you.
No, that makes perfectly good sense.
When was the last time you wanted to work more for less money? The appraisal industry is headed that way. You have to do more for the same money, and now you have less time for yourself. DataMaster can change that. With their easy-to-use software, DataMaster lets you spend more time analyzing and less time typing. Plus, you get more information than the other data import products. Head to www.datamasterusa.com/buzz for more information and to learn how you can save an hour per report.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So, Matt, sort of in a related topic to the last question, and you and I have talked about this before. I also talk about it with my brother who owns a large firm. It's the death of the appraisal firm and the impact that has had across the entire industry. What are your thoughts around that?
One way or another, we're going to have to grapple with the policy components that have ultimately led to this, because I think we've done a huge disservice to the industry. We've fractured the appraisal community into predominantly sole proprietors, operating out of a third bedroom. And there's nothing, wrong with that, of course, at all. But what we're missing in that for a large portion of licensees across the country is the training and the mentorship and the ability to bounce ideas off of one another that comes with a firm environment. And so honestly, a lot of the things that we seem to want solutions to also, which is creating additional appraisal quality, having some more standardized practices, being able to bring new licensees into the business, all directly connect to empowering firms to lead that charge. I know, some of this ties also to other proposals that are on the table in terms of, hybrid valuations. And I know we're talking about now people who aren't appraisers at all inspecting properties. And to me, some of it is baffling in that we have a model to do this. It's called trainees who are directly.
I know. It's
exactly
shocking. Yeah.
Why are we trying to recreate the wheel? So I do think the firm environment would do a lot of good if we were promoting that more and creating the conditions to allow firms to thrive.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well, that sounds like a real positive note to end on. And
absolutely
look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas, if not sooner.
Absolutely.
And, Jim?
Joan and Matt, thanks so much for your time today. And thanks to all our listeners for joining us, as well as the sponsors for helping to keep this together. Like you heard Joan said, make sure you join us in Las Vegas for Valuation Expo, September 8th through 10th. Our room block is almost sold out at the Bellagio. We got an amazing room block, so make sure you sign up for that soon too. And if you have any questions, email info@appraisalbuzz.com. Thanks again and have a great day.